Entrepreneurship and private equity may seem worlds apart, but R&B Corvest says entrepreneurs would do well to consider private equity as a solution to effectively grow and exit businesses. Mike Donaldson and Martin Coetzee, both directors at R&B Corvest, join us with more. Mike, there's a perception that private equity and entrepreneurship don't quite mix, but R&B Corvest is proving that this is not always the case. Tell us about some of the things that you look for, the factors that you look for, and also the shared values that contribute to successful partnerships.
I think the two do go very well together. I think there is a perception that sometimes private equity competes or takes away the sort of entrepreneurial spirit of a founder. And I think it's nothing further from the truth, to be honest. I think private equity can actually stimulate and help entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs grow in our environment. Whereas if you compare that to an entrepreneur selling out his business to a trade player, for instance, typically he would exit the business, he would have no further involvement, and that whole family spirit or the entrepreneurship in that business would typically die.
When it actually comes to stimulating growth, a lot of the time entrepreneurs say that a lack of liquidity or access to capital is stifling, but private equity is seen as a solution to this. Martin, how exactly would this work?
I mean, obviously, private equity would step in when a business can't raise senior debt from a bank, a third-party bank. It's risk capital. So obviously, you want to, that's the level you need risk capital to grow your business. You can't leverage the business anymore, and you will raise the private equity money to actually grow the business. So you get a new partner in. They can help you fund the business. They can help you with acquisitions, and you can, with the money, you can actually grow the business. Yeah.
So you mentioned that with the money you can grow the business, but something I understand is very important for a private equity investor is to know that the actual business owners have got some skin in the game. Why is that so important?
I think it's absolutely key, and I think it's the fundamentals of any private equity business. But it's a partnership, and I think we always want our partners to be alongside us in the deal. We want them to take a similar risk to us in terms of it must be relative. So for instance, if they're putting in R1, we're happy to put in R100. But that R1 to the entrepreneur or the founder must be relative. It must be important in his life. And I think, unfortunately, humans and business people are driven by those sort of financial gains. And if someone doesn't have that skin in the game and it's a free option, which a lot of companies on market, on the JSE, for instance, a lot of those CEOs would typically have free options. But if something goes wrong, there's no downside risk for them. Private equity, on the other hand, you want the downside risk, and that downside risk stimulates thinking, stimulates people to be proactive.
You talked earlier about private equity allowing the entrepreneurial spirit of a family business to continue. At the same time, you talk about having management aligning their values with your values. How does that work? How do you come together at the table and decide, okay, this is the plan, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to make it work, while still allowing that business owner who's brought that business, who knows that business and has brought it to a certain stage to still continue to thrive?
Yeah, I mean, our typical style is not to get involved in the day-to-day running of the business, but we will try and corporatize the business. We try and set it up for an exit one day. So we bring more rigor to the whole boardroom. Lots of processes, but ultimately the entrepreneurial flair that we want in the business, we'll never destroy that. We cannot do it, because I think that's ultimately the core of the essence that we bought initially when we bought into the business. You don't want to destroy that culture at all.
Looking from a business owner perspective, why would they choose a private equity player, a local private equity player, as opposed to somebody else that's offering them a lot more money, or even going to a bank or a private financier for a loan?
The hardest thing for any entrepreneur or any owner or manager is letting go his little baby. And it's a debate we have time and time again. I think we should be psychologists and not financial people. But it's very hard for an entrepreneur to sell. Now, typically with those trade players or an international business coming in, they want the business. They're not interested in him. They're not interested in his management team a lot of the time. But I think the entrepreneur must realize that once he sells it, it's gone. His involvement will become very little going forward, and ultimately he will get out. And those businesses will then have probably professional managers parachuted, mostly from offshore, in some cases from local, whereas private equity is very much, it's not an exit. It's not 100% exit. It's always, there's a handover. Typically we would ask management to stick around or founders to stick around for 20, 30%. And quite often they do better out of selling the 30% with us 5 years down the line than selling the original stake. And we would then try and extract the value from that owner over many years. And he would become a mentor for the new management team. He would have involvement on the board. And there's a lot, I would say, there's a lot longer tail and involvement, which doesn't suit all entrepreneurs. But ones we've seen, the passion is there. No one wants to just literally go cold turkey and walk out tomorrow. I don't think you can add anything on that.
No, that's exactly it. I think, as Mike said, a lot of these guys built their businesses over years, and small things such as the color of their uniforms, for example, makes a big difference to these guys. And a multinational buys the business, all of a sudden they change the color or the corporate color or the branding. People don't like that. I think where we fit in as private equity, you let them run their business. They do what they know and what they know best. You don't fiddle in, as Mike says. You don't fix it if it's not broken. That's for sure.
You also mentioned preparing the business and the entrepreneur to exit. How exactly do you go about setting up that game plan, allowing the entrepreneur to exit, but maintain their financial security?
This is a plan that has to be built in many years before. So, this is not suddenly you arrive at a board meeting and everyone decides we're exiting next month. I think very few companies can achieve that. So typically we would plan that 2-3 years in advance, where we're all looking for an exit at a point in time. You need proper succession. So, you can't have a business where you sell to a trade player with no professional managers. So, with the family, with the entrepreneur who's ever sitting alongside us as shareholders, we would then plan who else is coming in for management, bring in different layers. If there's no one in the business, then let's go find expertise outside and kind of build that sort of almost like a sort of a history over the next couple of years. Alongside that, start building the financial acumen of the business in terms of reporting, structures. Any potential buyer wants to come in, they want to see, regular sort of financial management accounts. They want to see proper financials signed off on time.
I think if you've got a smallish business and I'm going to sell to another individual, those guys typically don't really care. But the moment you start dealing with your multinationals or your bigger private equity businesses, the guys want to see a track record, like as Mike said. They want to look at your monthly management accounts. They want to look at your succession planning. Very, very key in these businesses. So if you don't have proper succession planning, also very difficult to sell a business down the track. So I mean, the exit is ultimately the end goal for all of us. And you've got to put all these building blocks in place to actually make sure that you get to that point in the right shape and form.
So what actually drives the reasons behind an entrepreneur wanting to sell?
So, I mean, how long is a piece of string, for instance? So I think that there's various reasons. I think first and foremost is probably it's an age profile. It's a retirement policy, whereas a lot of founders they put all their money into a business for many years. It's time to realize their wealth. It's time to go on to the next phase of their life. And I think that would probably be, it's the dominant reason, looking to extract and diversify their wealth, especially where we sit in South Africa today. I think, everyone likes a little bit of offshore investing. And that is typically the first call. Second is probably black empowerment. I think managers and founders realize they have to change. They have to bring in different shareholding base, which becomes a liquidity event for the founder. And I think last but not least is probably expertise. A lot of founders can grow a business to a certain level, but battle to take it beyond. They're very comfortable at it from a technical and financial expertise, but once they get into the bigger domain and competing with the bigger industries, I think some feel a little bit uncomfortable, and typically we find them looking to exit.
Mike Martin, thank you so much for your time. Mike Donaldson and Martin Coetzee are directors at R&B Corvest.